Anticipate the State of the Nation address. First, Professor Kofi Abuchi is the Dean of the UPSA's Law School. Dr. Humphrey Dake is the President of the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI. And Joseph Obing is the President of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA. Gentlemen, good morning to you all. Do we have our guest on the line? I think Dr. Dake is with us now. Doc, good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right. Well, this is an administration that came to power primarily on their campaigning about our economy. Their plan is to reset it. As the president delivers the State of the Nation address today, what is the expectation of industry in terms of what he will tell us about the reset of our economy?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. First and foremost, our expectation is that the president will come to the fore with the reality in terms of books that is discovered in terms of the state of the nation regarding the data, regarding the records, and the full state. Beyond that, we expect him to align his manifesto with the running IMF program that is ongoing, by his reflection and by the promises that he's tabled. How realistic are this with the existing IMF program? That in tandem, given that that's the state in which we find ourselves. So we expect him to tell us how he aligns his projects or his promises with the IMF program. Beyond that, within that context, we should be able to demonstrate to us the macroeconomic perspective in the medium term, short to medium term, still aligning with his promises and then that of the IMF program that we run it. In the macro, we definitely want to see how he seeks to bring about exchange rate stability, to the table, aligning it so with the program that is being run. Same for the inflationary figures. What is his plan to arrest the inflation and bring about structural transformation in the short term and to the medium term? We want to see how sustainable the forex. Currently, we realize there's some seemingly stability in the exchange rate performance. What are the underlying liability data and then the projections into the short and medium term? Once these macro-related issues are aligned with the IMF program, then you're building the confidence of the business community. Because the business community's confidence was restored when we signed on the IMF program. And beyond that, how is it going to align and give us some comfort? To the business community, this will be the first demonstrates that whilst it speaks to the reality on the table and aligning it with the various position of confidence.
Obviously, the 24-hour economy was another very important promise made by this government. Are you seeing indications of its implementation, and what do you expect the president to say about it?
And so goes back to the same foundation that I laid, because if you say that you do deliberate stimulation, which might call for policy interventions that may stimulate the productive sector of the economy, either by bringing in funding, or you go to the table and look at your policies that are non-funding related, and where do you tweak the policies such that it gives room and comfort to the local producer to pair up demand. There is demand, I keep saying, because once there is room for a lot of imported product, it indicates that there's local demand. how do you use policy to tweak it such that the local demand then stirs up and then gives the confidence to the business person or the industrialist to produce more. But prior to that, you need to bring about some stability in the macro front. And then when you tweak policies, i.e., we kept saying the certificate of conformity, which grants what we call pre-inspection of imported products from the source of origin, are looked at. Other delegated authorities, like the role of the standards authority, being set up to perform better. Once you do such, amidst many more, including taxes, then you are creating the room for demand to be stirred up and then for productivity to shoot up. So for the 24-hour economy, we have stated that it should be targeted and then deliberately stirred up with policy, considering that government keeps in terms of the exchequer is tough now. Go in for non-funding approach and look for policies that you use administrative approach to do that, and then with that to stir up the demand and create a conducive environment for industrialists and entrepreneurs to try to start demand by industry.
We also have Professor Abuchi on the time with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Imdake has sort of laid the foundation in terms of the expectation of industry. He mentioned that he fully expects the president to tell us what the books looked like once they opened them up following their assumption of office. There is a certain culture that any time there's a new government in office, they give us a very bleak picture of the books as they came to meet them. And this then transforms into the reason why perhaps certain promises cannot be either immediately or ever fulfilled. It's hackneyed, but does it work? How do you expect, if indeed we hear that from the president this morning, how do you expect the public to respond to such?
I think the state of the nation for this year is going to be a relatively easier message or statement from the president. And the reason I expect it to be a relatively easier statement is because the facts are actually out there. Now, first of all, we are parties to an IMF program. That in itself is a statement of a certain degree of mismanagement of the country, which is why we have gone back to the IMF. The IMF comes in to basically provide some sort of supervisory oversight for you to order your affairs in a way that otherwise you should have done on your own without any external supervision. So the IMF's provision of an external accountability itself is a statement of the state of the nation. And that's why I said it's likely to be a relatively easier one for the president because a number of things appear to be out there. The Constitution expects that the state of the nation is supposed to be the state of the nation address, not a projection of the nation. So very often we've had situations in which presidents have used the platform to actually project what they intend to do moving into the future. But that is not what the expectation is. The expectation is a statement of where we stand. And the reason is because the Constitution really doesn't see breaks in government. What the Constitution sees is that government is a continuum. So whether or not you have an election, whether or not you have a new president, whether or not there are changes in parties, whether the president is a totally new one or is quote-unquote a returnee president, all these are not considerations the Constitution is interested in. The Constitution sees government as a continuum. So every year the country has to move forward as a continuum. And in terms of government is generic. So in that sense, the Constitution expects that when you are given the state of the nation's address, the expectation is you are telling Ghana or you are given an account of what the state of the country which has been handed to you in terms of your management, what the state of the nation is. So as I indicated, with a lot of things that have happened, which generally is accepted by both parties and by both sides, that things have not exactly gone very well. I think that it will be a bit of a whitewash if the president presents a state of the nation that indicates that things are well. Clearly, things are not that well, and that partly also will explain why, in the end, he's likely to cap it with a projection of what is to be done moving forward. But I think it has to be a state of the nation, not a projection.
Yeah, but Prof, talking about state of the nation, and here in Ghana, the general acceptance is, something that then Member of Parliament for Bole Bamboy, John Dramani Mahama, stated, that the state of the nation should tell us where we are as a people, where we intend to go, and how we intend to get there. You say that's not what the Constitution says?
As I indicated, nearly all the past states of the nations have substantially done projections of the nation. Now, there's a degree to which I can understand why that is, because it's very hard to tell Ghanaians, it's very hard to tell the country what the problem is without responsibly telling them what you intend to do. As a president, as a leader, you have that natural responsibility to want to respond to what the solution to the problem is. And therefore, speaking or recounting the problem is, it's really an exercise in futility in some sense. So I can understand why they almost always end with a projection of what is to be done. However, I'm just pointing directly to what the Constitution mainly expects. It mainly expects an account of what has been done. So the state of the nation is actually supposed to be an address that looks into the past, mainly into the past, and a little bit of the future. So mainly into the past as it stands at the moment, the past and the present as it stands at the moment, and then moving into the future. But if you devote a substantial part to what you want to do, then really it is not a state of the nation. That is a statement of what the program or the expectation of a government is. And this has been the trend over the years, which I think substantially has been a distortion of what the Constitution really expects.
Talking about, many of us would know the conditions in which we are. Now, before President Akufo-Addo left office, he presented his address to Parliament also. He painted a good picture of the economy. He had indicated how his policies post Ghana's IMF program have put us on a sound footing for economic transformation. You say that's likely to change today if we hear from the president?
I think we may have lost one or both of our guests there. We apologize for that. Seems to be an issue with the line. Do we have one of our guests still?
No,
we've
lost both of them. So I think we can go for a short break and return, and
we'll be back
continue the conversation. Back with us, yeah, Prof. I was asking the question that you've had during President Akufo-Addo's last message to Parliament. He indicated how the economy post the IMF program was doing very well, and was ready for the transformation because his government, following the IMF program, had put in place the right measures. You say that's likely to change when President Mahama addresses us today?
I'm trying to understand your question. That is likely to change in terms of...
You're saying that will change because you say that we all know the challenges that we're facing, with, but I'm saying that President Akufo-Addo painted a very positive picture of the economy.
Right. Okay, I think I get you now.
Yes.
I think I get you now. Sorry. Well, so I again, as I indicated, it's going to be very difficult for the president to give a message of good times. In other words, that a country is living through good times. The President Nana Akufo-Addo's statement, clearly, I think anybody who opens his eyes to the factual reality will say that was counterfactual. And I think the outcome of the election itself, the results of the election, speaks volumes. Often a government performing well is not likely to be changed the way it was changed. And so, again, a lot of people on both sides of the aisle clearly accept the fact that our economic numbers, our data, the factual situation on the ground, the reality of the average Ghanaian, the circumstances of the country, a lot of things are not what they should be. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people in the NPP itself will accept. I have my doubts if we can have a rosy statement or a rosy picture of Ghana's situation currently being painted in the State of the Nation's address. Again, as I indicated, we are in the IMF. Let's be clear about that. That is one factual reality nobody can dispute. And that factual reality speaks to the fact that we have not managed our affairs well. If we have managed our affairs well, there will be no need for that external oversight that we have from an international financial institution like the IMF. So, again, this is not something that I would want us to get bogged in the politics of it. The reality is that things are not as good as they are, and by reason of that, it is unlikely, and it's going to be very difficult for any president today to stand before the country and say things are good.
Dr. Humphrey Mdake is back with us as well. Thank you so much for your patience, Doc. there is an expectation of the scrapping of nuisance taxes. Yet, government has already signaled their concern over ability to raise enough revenue, bearing in mind the bills that are to be paid. Do you expect the president to stick to that plan, or might there be some postponement in the scrapping of taxes, like the e-levy, for instance?
I did mention to you that he has an obligation to align his promises with the existing program that is being run as a part of the State of the Nation, which is the IMF, that he inherited. So how has he aligned the document and the promises that he made with the existing reality? So as much as my professor indicates that a reflection of the past, that is part of the engagement. He has over 2 hours to speak to the nation. I do not believe you use all the said 2 hours lamenting and then demonstrating the state without professing solutions regarding policy, strategic plans, and deliberate commitment to the private sector, which I speak for, going forward. I presume in his contest, he will balance it and give a proposition. It is in that context that the question of whether he will take down the nuisance taxes, as you described it, will reflect. So I presume that he, by now, with his team, should have aligned the manifesto promises with the existing program, and then within the whether if the set taxes can manage revenue. Minister of Finance.
Doc, can I ask you to reposition yourself? I think where the signal is a bit intermittent.
I'm in the same position. I'm in the same position.
Okay, if it's possible for you to move a little bit, so that we can.
Okay, let me try.
Yes, get a clearer signal, I think.
Yeah. So as indicated, I believe that the president has a duty to live to his promises that he made to the populace that gave mandate. And therefore, I presume his team should have balanced the business is looking up promises and consistency. Therefore, we expect him to do as he promised, and going forward, once he's aligned his promises with the state of the economy, which has an IMF underpinning agreement, he should go to his intentions and how to carry the country forward.
Now, Prof. Abuchi, the State of the Nation address is quite often not just about the state of the economy. The president is likely to venture into other areas like corruption, the fight against corruption and governance and so forth. What are your expectations of what he'll have to say about them?
Well, I think the president has recognized the necessity of dealing with the issue of corruption, and it's you can tell that his early moves, his tried dealing with the issue by first of all, very quickly declaring his assets and compelling his ministers to declare their assets. Be that as it may, I think the reality too is that some of those moves probably need to be deepened, if not enhanced and broadened, because the truth of the matter is the subject of corruption is becoming a fatigued one. People are getting tired of talking about corruption when nothing is done about it. Look, for as far back as somewhere around 2010, the World Bank estimated that Ghana loses $3 billion to corruption every year. That is some 15 years ago. So you can do an adjustment of that figure from the $3 billion. Perhaps I'm sure Ghana loses no less than $5 billion every year to corruption. And that is even a conservative estimate. So the reality is corruption is a major problem. And year on year, anytime Ghana has election, a major thematic issue that voters tend to base their decisions on tends to be the issue of corruption. And so any wise government will recognize the fact that corruption cannot be a subject by which the voters are moved. They may be frustrated that there's very little they can do in between elections to change corruption, but they ultimately make a decision on the basis of factors like corruption and the fact that governments are doing little or nothing about it. So I expect that in the State of the Nation's address, the President will touch on the question of corruption and indicate what strategic interventions he intends putting in place to deal with the issue of corruption and to move away from the business as usual approach that governments over the years have had to approach the subject with.
Now, beyond governance issues, what about education, healthcare? How do you anticipate his remarks to go in those areas too?
Again, I do expect that the President is probably going to take a very activist position on these issues. His initial moves in office tells you that he appears to be aware and rather active and sensitive about those subjects. And so, for example, there's been an education forum that has been held in Ho, and he's spoken about Agenda 111 and the fact that not much has been done in that area. I think there's a clear recognition that these are issues that are hitting Kenyans hard in the face, and we cannot take them for granted anymore. On the question of education, for example, we have to do our best to depoliticize the subject. Unfortunately, because education was a flagship policy of the NPP, the NDC was forced to respond. It was the same difficult approach that was adopted in the late 1980s when the new educational reforms then were introduced, the GHS system at the time. And they were heavily opposed by the then opposition, and because of that, they were politicized. Unfortunately, the same model was adopted in the introduction of free SHS. When a country politicizes education, no one wins. And the reason is because both parties will be racing down to the bottom, as it were, to outdo each other in the educational space, and in the process, the inconsistencies and the haphazardness of things will continue. Free SHS has come to stay. Unfortunately, nothing can be done about it in the context of its pure freeness. So the least that we can do as a country will be to embrace a certain model of consensus moving forward. How do we come together as a country to adopt free SHS as a policy that will not change government to government? And how do we remove the steep politicization of it when the discussion is being had about it? Almost a zero-sum game. You are either for it or you are against it. It can't be like that. Clearly, there are major issues in the educational space. The world is not waiting for us. If we want to continue training the labor material for the world, that will be worthy of the competition. We would have to have an educational system that is fit for purpose. In the circumstances of things, there are teething problems, and the parties continue to back at each other without looking at the subject. So I do hope that he will bring, more importantly, the subject of depoliticizing education to the fore, and I'm sure that a subject like that will be embraced. The question of healthcare is equally similar in the context of importance, and I'm sure the President will touch on the need for healthcare infrastructure and how the country, again, all these have to be embraced as a nation. Most important, I just want to say this finally, that it's important for us to understand that these are issues that have been dealt with in and by the Constitution. The Constitution recognizes the need for key social interventions in the nature of education and healthcare. They are all contained in the directive principles of state policy. So these are not political issues. They are issues that confront Kenyans, and it's important that we have minimum national policy that cuts across the parties, and that will be respected and regarded by both parties, regardless of who's in power. And I'm sure, like I said, moving forward, these moderate positions would likely help from a developmental standpoint without the extreme politicization that we often tend to bring.
Thank you. Dr. Humphrey Ayimdake,
Okay.
let's talk about trade for a minute. We saw in the papers this morning that our exports have really hiked up. We've crossed the 20 billion mark. It sounds like positive news. About half of that is gold, and we all know the dysregulated sector that gold is, and how unfortunately so much of what money comes from it doesn't stay in our economy. What sort of corrective measures are you hoping the President might have to share in the State of the Nation address on?
Well, that's crucial. I mean, it demonstrates the trade vulnerabilities of our country, and it's quite exciting to hear the good board concept that the President and his team seeks to deploy as one of the ways to manage the gold export and then the proceeds that come in. Granted that the framework under which the gold board will work is similar to what we know in the cocoa board concept. Perhaps that will give government significant leverage on the gold export and the proceeds thereof, i.e. the royalties and the various tax elements that comes to government. So it will be an opportunity for the president, considering that he's been in office for a few weeks, to appreciate how the gold board will work. So we look forward to hearing more on the concept of the gold board as one of the proposed solutions going forward. And we expect the president to speak on the debt position of the country. What is the existing debt position of the country, and how is it going to align the said position with all the manifesto promises, i.e. the 10 billion agenda to resuscitate a number of industries and push a number of sectors up. So for purpose of trade and the trade balances, we also look at how policy can be, or trade policies can be of enough benefit. How do you tweak it, considering the realities he's found himself in? So for purpose of the trade-related issues, what are the innovations using technology, using the private-public partnerships relationship to deepen the trade imbalances and then move forward from there? This is what we expect from the president on the trade front.
Right. You've given us lots of notes to make and lots of expectations as we sit through a couple of hours of the president delivering the State of the Nation address later this morning. I want to thank you for your time. Dr. Humphrey Ayim-Dake, President of the Association of Ghana Industries, and Professor Kofi Abuchi, the Dean of UPSA's Law School.